3, Blackology, a cultural science. This is a blackological legend. Long, long ago, about 2100 years in the black story, before the intervention of the European and Arabic colonialism, in the land of the blacks, in a place called Al-Kibalan, or the black civilization, our ancestors taught us and to the world to know thyself, and to thyself be true. The knowledge of self is power. The knowledge of self is the greatest knowledge of all. This is the act of self-determination. The beginning of wisdom is to know who you are. It is said that a people without wisdom will perish. The Legend of Blacology gives vision to a people who has struggled, and from struggles comes growth. Blackologist Professor Cross, UBZD, graduated from HBCUs such as Bishop and pursued blackological research at Purdue A&M University, where he united with a young black scholar, Dr. A.M. Duluth Sirleaf, PhD, UBZD, a graduate of Booker Washington Institute, located in Liberia, West Africa. It is said that birds of a feather flock together, as the ancestors and the Creator would have it. The Brotherhood of Blackologists UBZD and Dr. Sirleaf, PhD, UBZD, is the faith, prodigy, and prophecy of their heritage and culture. These two sons of black African culture continued their quest for blackology at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and incorporated Blackology Institute in 208 years of the redevelopment era. Quote unquote 1997. These two black scholars also conducted a 20-year research and study that produced, built, created, and invented the curriculums, lexicon, degrees, and research for the intellectual cultural science of blackology. The legacy, atmosphere, and events for the Legend of Blacology is an evolution from the 1920s through the 1970s in the black diaspora within the United States and Liberia, West Africa. These two localities are tied together in an inescapable bond of mutuality, caught in a single garment of destiny under the mist of the Harlem Renaissance, negritude, civil rights, human rights, black African independence, black conscious movement, and black power movement. Urological scholars ask the question to the black scholars, is there a cultural science, or is there a science in black America? or even in Africa, in the north, the south, the east, or the west? Or is there any science in black people? Many black scholars writing on this phenomenon have tried to develop analytical and methodological tools to differentiate their approaches to this statement and question. This is the foundation of what led to the legend of blackology. Black scholars such as the following elaborated and written on this legendary quest. Dr. Ronald Walter, in his writings, clearly demonstrated the subject at hand in this statement, treating the substance of black life as something secondhand which can be picked up at will, or as something we already know, that does not need systematic and constant elucidation, clarification, and development, is an insult to the quality and complexity of the black experience, and perpetuates the racist attitudes which graduate schools have of the value of the study of black life in general. The theory of a black social science by Dr. Ronald Walters. In the 1970s at Howard University, or the prophecy of blackology by Charles Maynard in the city of Chicago in the 1970s, and Negro history by Dr. Carter G. Woodson in 1933, with Negro History Week and the Black Panther Party with Black History Month, which evolved during the black consciousness, black awareness, and black power movements out of the theory of self-determination, of which was perpetuated by Marcus Garvey, Noble Jew Ali, Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Kwame Ture's call for black power, and Stephen Biko's Black Conscious Movement. This theory of which was motivated and inspired by Huey P. Newton, PhD, and Bobby Seale's Black Panther Party, use of the theory of black nationalism and black radicalism. The research and study developed for minds, hearts, and souls of black scholars of HBCUs is the basis for which the theory of blackology and its legendary notion have evolved. When you think of what black people need and what black people want, this is the substance of blackology. The legend of blackology also evolved from being identified, living, and being black people. When we are being identified as black people, we began to reciprocate this action by acting according to this identity. So, everything that we do is defined in this way. Everything that we do evolves from this identity of black people, and we cannot transcend who we are. So, this has become a way of life and culture of international acclaim. As black people, we began to develop a culture of survival based on being black people. Even if we are temporarily called something else, we still live as black people instinctively. You can see black people in any land you go to on the earth, on all 7 continents. The consistent ongoing research and study. The consistent ongoing research and study. Edward Wilmot Blyden, The African Society, 1903 said, "If the African educated on European lines is unable or unwilling to teach the outside world something of the institutions and inner feelings of his people, if for some reason or another he can show nothing of his real self to those anxious to learn and to assist him, if he cannot make his friends feel the force of his racial character and sympathize with his racial aspirations, then it is evident that his education has been sadly defective, that his training by aliens has done but little for him, that his teachers have surely missed their aim and wasted their time." The study of Black America by Black scholars on what Black people wanted and needed and how to make life better for the next generation is a major question and preoccupation. Before there was Blackology, there was Black knowledge, there was Black thought. The Legend of Blacology is an ongoing struggle for cultural commerce and intellectual evolution. It was in this theoretical framework that intellectual genius and creativity developed. Black thought such as Blackology. The Legend of Blacology continues to grow while the Black diaspora in the United States was still a recently emancipated community. Black scholars attempted to achieve sustainable development, raise intellectual insight, and be educated in urological studies. Black scholars saw the need to offer all Black people the opportunity to participate in intellectual process, and thus created educational programs designed specifically to raise intellectual knowledge, eradicate illiteracy, empower Black youth, enable Black people to participate as citizens in the intellectual process, and assist each other in battling white supremacy racism in the Black diaspora. In an effort to achieve these goals, Black scholars established an intellectual formula, an informal education system accessible to all Black people in Black America, in the North and the South. And simultaneously, they did the same thing in Liberia and all of Africa. It was at this time in the 1960s, the Legend of Blacology was prophesied by a young Black scholar named Charles Maynard in the city of Chicago, Illinois, where he said, one day in Black America, there would come a science equal to sociology, psychology, anthropology, entitled Blackology. Julius Nyerere said, "We are the custodians of the culture of our ancestors, mothers and fathers. We are the perpetuators of the culture of our children. We have no right to leave behind a culture that is less fertile than the ones our parents left to us." According to Blackologist Dr. Amos Muhammad Duluth Sirleaf, this will serve as the matrix within which Black scholars have developed the Legend of Blacology. It specifically will give and gain light to ideals and nurture them through Blackological dialogue and exchange. Although this is a necessary and conducive time for challenging the fallacies of urological and Arabic cultural dominance as an inadequate view for Black people to resolve their own cultural conflicts. Blackologically, there has been and is a national, international, imperialistic, and urological conspiracy to culturally condition black people to believe that urological and Arabic scholars are superior to black scholars. The Legend of Blacology evolved from the uncompromising struggle against this cultural conditioning of black African people, evolved from the urological and Arabic cultural phenomenon of the underestimation, devaluing, and marginalizing of black African people in captivity and enslavement is a byproduct of colonialism. Therefore, the Legend of Blacology evolved from the HBCU's hope to be shared as an eye-opening and wake-up call among black scholars and the masses of black people. According to the Legend of Blacology, every culture has autonomous knowledge. This knowledge is developed from our experience, through which is refined by our research and study. This knowledge was provided by our elders, black scholars, and ancestors as cultural values and traditions. The Legend of Blacology is entitled and enlightened and dependent through experience, self-determination, self-education, and institutional process of intellectual acquisition and learning. Blacology Legend is black scholars' contribution to the discussion that will enhance the intellectual value of this study in the black diaspora. The Legend of Blacology is consistent elaboration of the subject matter, not mindless repetition, but we emphasize a point to the realization of black culture. So if you see the Legend of Blacology more than once, it is the intent of the black scholar to make a point of intellectual thought in the justice, redemption, advancement of black people, and the redevelopment of black African culture. The Legend of Blacology is the evolution of black people and their culture. The Legend of Blacology is the experience of the spirit of their uncompromising struggle as their cultural knowledge and genius, creativity, and black story. The Legend of Blacology is the coming of cultural commerce. The Legend of Blacology will emphasize the evolution of black African culture in the black diaspora within the United States and our mother, fatherland, labeled Africa or Al-Kibalan. The lack of cultural knowledge is an increasing threat to the advancement and redemption of black people and the redevelopment of black African culture, both nationally and internationally. This is the essence of Blacology. The lack of autonomous intellectual science and study is a major challenge to the growth and development of black African people. The Legend of Blacology is important to recognize the value of the knowledge of self for the black man and the black woman's cultural autonomy. The Legend of Blacology has been due to the nationalistic, natural, and instinctive efforts in every major region of the black world, with specific emphasis on intellectual genius and creativity. The lack of autonomous body of knowledge has wiped out some and stagnated other achievements of decades of economic, civil, human, and cultural redevelopment in the black culture. This is the essence of the need for the Legend of Blacology. In the case of the Legend of Blacology, of which is the main objective of black scholars, is a solution to the problem. In the Legend of Blacology, the last 30 years in the evolution of black culture has been dedicated to the achievements of centuries of black scholars, documentation of the black historical and intellectual evolution. For many black people who have given their lives in the physical, spiritual, and intellectual uncompromising struggle for redemption, equality, freedom, and justice for all people lays the basis for the Legend of Blacology. The legend is linked to the fabric of black African culture throughout the world. The Legend of Blacology leaves a legacy of intellectual genius and creativity in all aspects of black culture as individuals, groups, and in institutional capacity. The Legend of Blacology for many people dealing with miseducation and colonialism is a bitter experience that will never be forgotten. For the present generation of black people, the Legend of Blacology is extremely imperative in any transition for captivity, enslavement, and post-colonial conflict to a more stable and secure cultural environment that will facilitate the service, need, supply, and demand for intellectual, cultural science, commerce. The Legend of Blacology takes a look at other cultures that have developed autonomous studies, and it is evident that such an entity has led to a more sustainable cultural environment for these particular people, i.e. Arab, European, Oriental, or Asian, Indian, etc. The Legend of Blacology will allow black scholars to return to institution building by which to establish careers, commerce, and intellectual entrepreneurship with the black African culture. In the black diaspora, 77 years after the Haitian Revolution to about 20 years past the first mark of the redevelopment era of black culture, end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century in the Geological Society. Black scholars were building businesses, colleges, universities, cities, nations, in spite of the segregated laws of the Arabic and Eurological vision of the world. These institutions were built to house, perpetuate, and promote Eurological studies. This was all that black scholars could do, and it was safe, but it was not all they had knowledge of. In the Legend of Blacology, now is the time to build the intellectual cultural science and the University of Black African Culture as an institution and science that will be perpetual and traditional for black people to acquire their autonomous cultural knowledge. In the Legend of Blacology, we do this, and we add to the technical training skills with our autonomous intellectual body and knowledge. The merger of our sojourn with our intellectual abilities and technical training skills are the instruments to make a holistic black culture. In the Legend of Blacology, black people must think for themselves. This is the Legend of Blacology in the blackological minds of black people in the black diaspora within the United States. This blackological legend will shine a light on the greatest assets that black people have, is indeed to be focusing on the development of autonomous intellectual science, which will provide cultural wealth as an international intellectual resource theory to build a sustainable commerce within the black world. The Legend of Blacology will address issues and questions concerning the black diaspora's service, needs, supply, and demand to establish the ideals, beliefs, philosophies, concepts of the black scholars as intellectual thought and cultural science. This Legend of Blacology will show how this black African intellectual cultural science education can be implemented into elementary, junior high schools, and post-secondary and graduate levels at HBCUs in the United States and Africa. This Legend of Blacology will also reveal population data of the black African cultural market that exists in every public-private charter schools and the HBCUs in the United States. The Legend of Blacology will also expose the opportunities to establish careers in entrepreneurship in the intellectual studies industry as a marketable entity that is productive, creative, an honorable profession, and cultural science. Our goal is to introduce the profession of blackologists into the academic academies throughout the world. Black scholars at the HBCUs, PBIs, independent black institutions. Blackology is arguably the best known and greatest intellectual folk legend on the development of cultural science. Its black historical existence became famous when a black scholar at the HBCU began the research and study on blackology in search of a master's degree in the urological studies, following the great black scholar, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote 2,038 books, articles, and pamphlets. The urological scholars and their institutions had built a stream of intellectual studies to pacify the civil rights, human rights, and black power movements of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, such as black studies, African American studies, Pan-African studies, African studies, and multicultural studies in the West and in the East United States. To speed up the intention of an autonomous cultural knowledge, a young black scholar named Charles Maynard prophesied the coming of cultural science of black culture by the declaration of the word blackology, spelled B-L-A-C-K-O-L-O-G-Y. In the 1970s, standing up for his right as a black scholar and a human being, challenging the miseducation and racism, white supremacy, to a duel, displaying the genius and creativity of the black story. With the gift of genius, creativity, and talent, the research and study of blackology was soon after invented by a HBCU scholar named Professor W. Cross of Bishop College, who read the word blackology in a Black History course in an after-school program at DuSable High School, Jean-Baptiste DuSable High School. The ancestors was calling and directing. In Chicago, Illinois, on the south side, in the Inglewood area, in the 1920s, 4 Black scholars, W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, George Jackson, and Arthur A. Schomburg, determined that Black knowledge was based on actual incident that probably occurred between 1428 and 1510 during the Middle Passage in the Arab and European slave trades. It was the rebellion and insurrection of the Black captives in their unification against the Arab and European abductors in the Middle Passage, which provided atmosphere for the manifestation of the legend of Blacology. Once the Black scholars recognized their color was being used against them, they revolted as Blacks. In the historical Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, in the East, Southeastern Black diaspora, however, Black scholars could trace the exact characteristics of Blacology. In any case, the legend of Blacology has evolved into one first and second century of the redevelopment era of Black culture as an intellectual cultural science and admired illustrations among Black scholars. Over the years, this Blackological legend has intrigued everyone, from undergraduate professionals to graduate doctorals, candidates, and the PhDs themselves. According to Black scholars, Introduction to Blacology, Blacological Dissertation, 2005, the most influential rendering of Blacology legend by the author is Popular Blacological Research and Study in 214 years of the redevelopment era, which later in 209 years of the redevelopment era recast as A Brief Introduction to Blacology. The most acclaimed interpretation by Black scholars identify Blacology as a prototype for intellectual cultural science, which developed professionals and instructors like Dr. A.M.D. Sirleaf in Liberia at Cuttington University, and Blackologist Professor Cross, UBCD, of blackology.com, Sojourner Douglas College, and Prince George County Public Schools. The legend of Blacology may also be inspired by the characters such as Malcolm X in the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee in 1992, Sing Q in the movie Amistad in 1997 by Steven Spielberg, Martin Luther King Jr. in the movie King, the Martin Luther King story, directed by Ivy Mann, 1978, and Joe Pittman in Henry Gaines' novel, The autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, 1971. Blackologist UBZB has written poems that respond to the legend of Blacology, such as The Way of Blacology, The Myth of Blacology, and The Legend of Blacology. The Legend of Blacology has been compared to other intellectual studies. Blacology's invention is associated with justice, redemption, advancement of black people, and the redevelopment of black African culture, and the blackological illustration of cultural autonomy, self-determination versus Arab and European colonialism. There are many versions of this black historical legend. In almost all versions of the legend of Blacology, the black scholars stand to fight against all aspects of racism, white supremacy. The Legend of Blacology is a black scholar. Exceptional intellectual gifts and the uncompromising struggle as the cultural knowledge. As former HBCU graduates, possibly born in St. Louis, Missouri, 1954, and Liberia, South Africa, 1952. These two black scholars, blackologists, become the most inspired black scholars in the latter part of the 20th century, which set in motion the development of blackology, a cultural science, from the HBCUs across the Midwest and Southwest to the East and Southeast, and black diaspora in the U.S. However, they became the founders and owners of Blackology Research and Development Institute, Incorporated. The institution was needed to do the work for the legend of Blackology, to provide jobs, careers, entrepreneurship for black scholars. Blackology challenges the HBCUs to be responsible for the justice, redemption, advancement of black people, and the redevelopment of black African culture, and the implementation of Blackology into the HBCUs, all 104. Blackology is an ideal whose time has come. Blackological thought and message. If the legend of Blackology is to be used by black people of the black diaspora, the gains of which they have struggled so far and worked so hard in the black world will be guaranteed. The legend of Blackology can increase intelligence and cultural development, improve character, and bring special ability and awareness, consciousness, not just consciousness, but black consciousness to any and all black people when it is educated to them. It may seem at first as a difficult subject, but it is not. It is far easier than colonial, Eurological, and Arabic school subjects. For black people, it is innate. Many black people have already studied it to a professional level. The harvest is plenty and the laborers are few. The gate for the legend of Blackology are wide open to black people. A professional blackologist has more cultural knowledge and capability, even capacity to help black people than any other urological field. If black people, even on a part-time basis, study it, use it with other black people, if black institutions were to be set up in the black diaspora for black people, their customary ability, cultural activity, intelligence would improve far beyond any future potential loss. Study and research the Legend of Blacology and use it to help your own black family. Let them truly walk in the sun and take their place amongst the most brilliant black people in the world. By blackologist Professor Wilder Zamani, Cross, UBCD, Blackology, a cultural science. The legend must go on. Tell your brothers and sisters, your mothers and fathers, your cousins. Tell your friends at work. Tell everybody. There is a new legend growing in the black culture. It is the intellectual cultural science of blackology. The black culture is evolving. It's not the same as it was 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Definitely not 100 years ago. And the evolution is going on. The black scholars are in the business of legend making. And the Legend of Blacology is definitely a legend to be talked about. You must know, you must research and study. Go on the internet, click on any one of the links. Listen to the welcome. Know the definition. Blackology doesn't need any urological or Arabic permission. Blackology is something that we do. We don't have to ask nobody. All we have to do is do. If the black culture is not what it should be, the Legend of Blacology is to make it what it should be. And it is up to black people to do this. We can't be politicking to such a degree that we forget our own cultural integrity. We, as a people, got a job to do. And we don't have to apologize for the Legend of Blacology. This legend has been with us since the beginning of our captivity. This blackological knowledge, this black science, this idea has been handed down through centuries, generations by our people. We have been thinking, dreaming, working, and doing it without even knowing that the creators and most of our ancestors has blessed us with one to continue the uncompromising struggle of our people. Blackology, the legend.